Hey everyone, welcome to episode 23 of the Solving Problems podcast, where we help you use story to reach more people and grow your church. My name is Jonathan Crone, and I'm the host of the show. We're joined, as always, by Kyler Nixon, our co-host. Kyler, go ahead and say hey to everybody.
Hey to everybody.
Hey to everybody. Today we are talking with another StoryBrand certified guide, Josh Taylor, who used to be an executive pastor of a church. And we're going to talk to him about the experience he had with implementing StoryBrand with his church and the success that they had, because some of the success that they had that they were able to track was incredible. Kyler, did you ever see the PDF of the success that his church had?
I did. I'll paint you guys a picture for it because you're listening and you're not seeing it. So it's basically a graph where the left side of the graph is towards the bottom and the right side of the graph is towards the very top. So which is, I think that part of it is symbolizing growth over like a 1 year span.
No, what even 1 year, it was like 6 months. It was ridiculous, the success that they had. And really they implemented it, StoryBrand, on their website and into some email campaigns. And their church grew. They almost doubled in size in 3 or 4 months. So I'm really excited for you to hear from Josh. And as always, we try to set up the problem for you before we get into it. And the problem with most church websites is that while they look nice, they don't actually speak to how their church uniquely solves the problems the people are trying to reach. They say great things about the church, but those great things don't tell the guests how you can help what they're looking for. And that's why most websites aren't nearly as effective as they could be. And we know that you have a great church and that you have a great church and you want to communicate that to people. So today we're talking to Josh Taylor, StoryBrand certified guide, former executive pastor, about what they did in his church to implement StoryBrand on their website and into some email campaigns. But before we get to that, we get to hit you with our weekly disclaimer. Kyler, can you go ahead and hit them with that, please?
Yes, sir. We are not affiliated or employed by StoryBrand. We are StoryBrand certified guides, which means we've spent a week with Don Miller and his team in Nashville learning the StoryBrand framework and helping organizations like yours implement it. But this podcast and us in general are not affiliated or employed by StoryBrand.
Very well done. You've done this a lot this season.
Thank you. I've been practicing in my mirror all morning.
You have. And speaking of this season, all episodes of season 3 are available right now on whatever podcast platform you prefer. We have all 8 episodes right now. We dumped them all at one time. So you can hear from other people in your shoes and the success that they've had using StoryBrand. But we're going to bring the dance music back up, and then Josh will be on the other side, and we'll talk to him about the success that they had implementing StoryBrand. And we're here with Josh now. Josh, go ahead and say hey to everybody.
Hey, everybody.
So before we talk about what you all did to implement StoryBrand on your website and in your communications, I want to step back and set the context for where you guys were in ministry and what you were doing. So can you tell us a little bit about the church you were at and what you guys were doing before implementing StoryBrand?
Yeah, so we were a church plant that started in a restaurant in 2006. And just a series of a lot of different things. I was actually a college student at the time. And we wanted to have a church that was really geared towards skeptics and, people who had been burned by the church, that were wanting something different. Either they grew up in church and it just didn't become what they thought it should have been or could have been or wanted it to be or whatever it might be. And so we started a church in a restaurant on Sunday nights because they weren't open. And 2 years later, we actually bought the assets to that restaurant and continued to meet there for a total of about 8 years. And then in 2014, October 2014, moved locations, kept doing what we were doing. And I was there for almost 12 years of that, one as a college student and then coming on staff a couple of years later, full-time as the executive pastor.
So when you guys started going through the StoryBrand process, this was what, 2017?
Yes, 2017.
Okay, so the church would have been 11 years old then.
Yeah.
What did your website look like and communicate at that point before StoryBrand?
So honestly, our website didn't look that bad, especially as far as church websites go. We had a good looking website. It had some relevant information on there. There were definitely some things that we needed to change. The homepage, it had our name, our logo, and a giant picture of downtown Mobile, Alabama, which is where we were located. It had, we were multi-location. So we a few years ago in March of 2014, it was March 2014. We started another location about 50 miles away from our main location, or 50 minutes. And so it had information on those two campuses, but you kind of had to look for it a little bit. We used a lot of big language, like we're a multi-denominational church, which, in the South, what does that mean? We had things that we thought we were communicating really well by using certain words that didn't mean anything to anybody because it's just not the jargon that people were using in our community. So we had a fairly decent looking website as far as design goes. It just was not communicating what we wanted it to communicate.
So basically a pretty website that probably suffered from curse knowledge a little bit, that spoke to your staff, but not to the people you were trying to reach.
It spoke to our staff, and it spoke to the core group of people that had been there from the beginning. We didn't think about, when we were designing the website, we were not thinking about the people on Saturday night trying to figure out where they were going to go to church Sunday morning.
So what was the process of story branding the site like? Was it hard to develop the brand script for that?
So I went through the process in a way that I probably would not recommend people go through the process, because I was going to be certified as a guide. I got the online course several weeks before it and started watching it, and honestly started implementing a lot of it before I even went to the workshop, which I don't recommend. And then I got proud of myself and had Don throw the website up onto the screen at the workshop, and I thought, here's the one. This is, he's going to bring me on his team. This is going to be amazing, and he tore it apart. So it was a very humbling experience. So I started implementing it before, but I did kind of, I had the luxury of really helping build the culture at our church. I had the luxury of shaping the direction that we were going, understanding the heart of our lead pastor. He was a good friend of mine. We talked often. So I really understood his heart and what he was trying to do. And he just sort of trusted me, and our staff really trusted me to do what needed to be done. So building the brand script was not that difficult, simply for me, because I understood who our character was and the problem that we were trying to solve. And where most of us get this wrong is we overthink this part. And I just knew already, here's who we are. We value deep biblical teaching. We value authentic community. And so this is who we are. We value family discipleship. So we're going to communicate that, because this is what people are looking for in our community. They're looking for something that's different, and they're looking for a church who understands why they're different from the church next door.
We'll get back to hearing about the success Josh's church had in just a second. But if you're in the spot that he was when he showed Don his website and realized that, maybe I'm a little too close to this and you're just needing an outside perspective, I would love to help you and your church build not only a great looking website, but a great looking website that motivates people to do something, to get involved with your church, to show up to your events, to make a decision to follow Jesus. Whatever that looks like for your church, I would love to partner with you. If that sounds like something you would like to explore, head over to hirejonathan.com and fill out the form, and we'll get to talking about how we can create a great website that moves people to action and helps you reach people in a way that you've never reached before. So it's hirejonathan.com, and we'll get to work in spreading the gospel in your town and increasing your impact in your community. So once you went through that process, so one of the things that I've noticed with churches, the plan they kind of struggle with, because there's Connect, Grow, Serve, there's all these different things. Did you guys already have a good plan in place that you were doing, or did you have to think through that and kind of revamp some of the things you were doing?
So our idea was simple church. And so we were not using a lot of the same language that a lot of other churches were using. In fact, we were saying if other churches are using that, we probably shouldn't, simply because, not that other churches were bad, but why do we need to be like every other church? And so we wanted this simple church idea. We wanted to, be very clear about who we were. The problem is we were using language that we understood and not language that other people understood. So, you have Connect, Grow, and Serve. which are, great. I think, I see a lot of websites that are using that kind of language. For us, it was biblical teaching, family discipleship, and authentic community. And, those were building on a couple of reputations that we had in the community, but also something that we wanted to be very clear that we valued, which was authentic community. And one of the things that we wanted to communicate was, what you see is what you get. Simple church. We're not going to, do all the big bells and whistles. We're not going to do the big attraction events to get people there. What you see is what you get. And we want to be authentic in doing it. After we story branded, we knew how to communicate that. Before we story branded, we didn't really understand that was something that we needed to communicate.
So for plan, did you guys go process or agreement, or did you do both?
We did more agreement. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And this is what I would recommend for people as they go, especially churches that go through StoryBrand, is if you looked at our website today, it would not pass most framework for most StoryBrand guides. But that was very intentional for us because we had some reputations that we had to overcome. One, we were a church plant that met in a restaurant in a storefront. We didn't have a steeple, and so we had a reputation in the community of being a cult. We didn't label ourselves as a denomination. We called ourselves multi-denominational because we had Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterians, you name it, that were showing up. And so, we, instead of Mars Hill Community Church, we were just Mars Hill Church. Actually, our original name was People of Mars Hill, and StoryBrand kind of helped us change that too, because that was probably one of the reasons why people thought we were a cult, is because we had a weird name. And so we had a couple of things that we had to overcome. So we built our site to really answer those questions first. Here's what we believe. And we summarized our statement of faith with like 10 bullet points of, very quickly, you can see that we're a biblical church. We don't teach heresy, all of these different things. So you can see this is what we believe. And then under or outlining what our values are, so that the second question people had is, why do you not have kids events on Wednesday nights, or youth choir, or Sunday school, or all of these different things? And so we had a chance to outline, we value family discipleship. So here's what that means. So you're not going to find these things here. If that's what you want, then there's some great churches in the area that offer these things. So we really used our setup to answer the questions and the objections that people already had. And they were curious. They wanted to check us out, but they wanted to make sure if somebody sees me walk into Mars Hill, are they going to think that I'm, giving up my faith and backsliding and all this stuff. So we just wanted to make very clear the objections that people already had. Also, the name Mars Hill was starting to carry some baggage a couple of years ago too.
Yeah. I think what's interesting that you guys did that I think a lot of people struggle with is they feel like they have to communicate all 7 pieces of the StoryBrand framework on the front page of their website.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys really chose to let that shape your message, but then take that message and really your homepage spoke into the things you felt were important for your community.
Yeah, they really speaking to the objections first. Once, and honestly, I'm not on staff at the church anymore, but I'm still on retainer with them to do their website and a few other things. And I'm about to suggest that we start changing the homepage to move into more of a StoryBrand format that's going to kind of have that value proposition of aspirational identity thing of growing in your faith and understanding biblical concepts and these things, and probably move into that because we've been in this format for several years. And so people, we've communicated it well now, and I think our reputation in the community has changed now. And so now it's time to really get those people that want to say, okay, why is this church different than, the 137 other churches that are within 2 miles?
Like when you went through that process, did you have to completely rebuild the site from the ground up, or was it just changing the words and were some of the things that were on your current site?
The only reason I changed from the ground up is because I switched platforms. If I was not switching platforms, then I wouldn't have had to change a whole lot because, again, our design looked great. We needed to change our words. We needed to change some pictures. We were using a lot of pictures of our building and our city and inside the space of people worshiping and our, teaching pastors teaching, but not really people engaging with one another. And if one of your core values is authentic community, you want to kind of show that through pictures. So we weren't selling a building, even though our old website was kind of doing that.
I think that's one place that a lot of people get in some trouble is, at least what I've noticed when churches send me pictures for their website, there's a lot of arms raised in worship type pictures, or people praying, and those things are great and they're meaningful to Christians, but to the people we're trying to reach, it can look cultish or out of touch. And so one of the things you all did, and I remember looking through your website before we started this interview, like it was pictures of people together, because you wanted to get that authentic community. So if you're wanting to show that type of vibe to your community, that's all about people and groups and getting them connected. If you're going on the "you belong here" or "find your place to belong" or "welcome home," then your pictures have to go along with that idea and not just be people sitting at the right hand of Jesus worshiping him. While that's good, that's further down the process.
And there's places for those. If you're going to show people, if you want to communicate to them what a worship experience is like on a Sunday morning, or maybe, for us, we had a very relaxed atmosphere. We did round tables throughout our worship center instead of pews and rows and traditional seating. And so we wanted to communicate that, and make, so we used pictures for that. We wanted to show our building a little bit in the context that we're not a traditional looking church. So if you're going to walk in here and think, I'm going to be comfortable sitting in pews and these kind of things, you're going to be sitting at table, possibly with people you don't know. Think of going to a cruise or something at dinner time. So
you implemented these changes. And one of the things I love that you did, and the reason I want to talk to you is because you actually case studied this out.
Yes.
So you've got the numbers to back up. So I wanted to be able to tell people, our listeners, about this. So when you implemented StoryBrand and made these changes, what type of results did you see?
So immediately we saw an increase in attendance, a significant increase in attendance. And I think there was several reasons. One of the things that we did was implement it into our website. But honestly, that's not the main place that we implemented it. We redesigned our website completely, so it was a big deal. But the main area that we started implementing StoryBrand was in how we communicated outside of our website, how we communicated during our worship services, on social media, emails that were going out, all these different things. We changed the way that we did it. And we really got out of our own way. We started identifying the problem that we were trying to solve, whether it was as a church as a whole, or an event that we were doing, or why we needed volunteers, whatever it might be. And so we started talking about the problems that we were actually trying to solve as a community. And so we saw 76% growth in attendance in the first, really less than 3 months, which is ridiculous. We had to start a second service within less than 2 months after implementing StoryBrand. We were just kind of scrambling. We had moved to the new building in 2014. Attendance started to really kind of decline a little bit because the space was different. People kind of thought that we had sold out because we moved to a bigger building. And so we were losing some of our core people. And it was right around the time that the name Mars Hill was carrying some baggage, and we had to overcome that a little bit without really changing our name, because we're not associated with any of the other churches. We were actually named after the restaurant that we started in, which was called Mars Hill Cafe. And so we saw that 76% growth in attendance within the first couple of months. We saw our live stream views skyrocket. I can't remember the exact number on that. We saw our unique website visitors. The great thing about StoryBrand is SEO takes care of itself. And so we started seeing unique visitors rising on our website because, we were answering the questions that people were asking on Google, because that's what the StoryBrand framework does.
So let me jump in here. So what you did, so you StoryBranded your website, which that was the backbone of most church communications. People are always going to check out the website before they come to church.
Right.
So what you did was, once you started talking about problems in your other communications, in your social media, on stage or whatever, mainly social media here, once people connected with that social, you then had the website to back it up and to answer the rest of those questions once they were intrigued. Exactly. So it's like your social was the top of the funnel. If we think of a sales funnel, which I hate saying that with church, but you get the idea. Mm-hmm. If your social was the top of your funnel, your website then became your greatest reference for people who were wanting to check you out.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we would intrigue them with the problem. I mean, we would open up, if we were doing an event, we would open up with a question of what that event is trying to solve. If it's something that's going to connect people, where it's just kind of a women's breakfast or something like that, we would open up with, ladies, do you want to connect with some other women in the church? We know it's difficult, where it's easy to come in here and just be a number on Sundays, and we want to make sure that you're connecting and growing with people. And so we've got this event, and we would lay out just simple information. The other thing that we did is we story branded our facility. And the biggest part of that is, instead of having 17 different calls to action on Sunday morning during the announcements, we had one place in the lobby that people could go to find out information on whatever they wanted to get. And we just pointed them there. If you want more information about this or to register, go to the welcome desk in the main lobby and ask the folks that are there, pick up the card or whatever it is.
So there's a clear call to action.
Very clear call to action, where before it was just see Bob, and nobody knows who Bob is.
Yeah. I just pulled up the case study you did, and your live stream views grew by 166%.
Yeah.
Which that's nuts. Which, I mean, you kind of think, if people are seeing the social posts, they're going to check out the website because your website views went up, and they're probably going to watch a service online before showing up. So those two things went up, and at the same time, you guys grew by 76% attendance wise.
Yeah. And what's remarkable about that is it was right after summer, and we have a pretty big college population at our church, just because of the style of church that we are. And I would say 90% of our college students were gone throughout the summer, and they're watching us on live stream during the summer to stay up to date, because we teach through books of the Bible at a time. And so those numbers weren't the reason why they skyrocketed. It skyrocketed after those college students had come back to be a part of it. They'd already been there for a month before these numbers started to rise.
So in reality, I mean, just looking at, and we'll put this PDF up on the website. So if you go to solvingproblemspodcast.com, on this episode's post, we'll make sure to link to this case study. But like, you guys converted almost half of the people who watched your live stream to get them to actually show up to church.
Yeah.
Which is incredible, because people aren't going to show up every single week. So you probably even pulled in maybe even 2/3 of the people who are watching online. That growth, you got them in the door into the church.
Yeah. One of the issues that we had is we had a lot of older people that didn't really like the style of music, or they didn't, we were a younger church, or you would think we're a millennial church. Our lead pastor was in his 40s, not quite a millennial, but most of our staff are millennials. The older people didn't love the music, they didn't love the atmosphere, but they loved the teaching. So they would watch us and supplement their teaching. Well, we started having senior adults start coming to our church and just embrace the community, embrace the chaos. And honestly, they came and started loving it, because they said they just love watching the young people worship. It makes them feel so much younger and gives them so much hope for the future generations. So that's really where a lot of our conversion was getting the older folks that were kind of outside of what our typical demographic was to really come and embrace it, because we were being really clear about who we are and what they should expect when they show up. Because before, we were not communicating what to expect. And so people were just scared to show up and feel stupid or lost, or, this is chaos or something like that. And it wasn't what they thought it was going to be.
The last question, then we'll get you out of here. I want to switch gears just a little bit and tap into your experience as an executive pastor. If someone is listening to this and they're a communications director, or they're in a role that's not on that executive leadership team, how would you suggest them approaching their leadership to bring up the topic of embracing StoryBrand, whether it's completely or it's just rewording their homepage? How would you suggest that they bring that topic up?
So most church communicators in the average church is probably going to be the youth minister or the worship pastor. And, and if they're at a church that has the resources to have that specific one, that's awesome. And the person they're probably going to be going to is going to be the senior pastor or the associate pastor. And I can't harp on this enough. Go with humility, because pastors are carrying a lot of scars. They get criticized often. And so before you take the StoryBrand framework to your executive team or to your senior pastor, whoever it is that you have to take it to, read the book and then build a brand script for how you want that conversation to go. So if we're going to have this conversation, who's the character? It's whoever the person is I'm talking to, and what's the internal, external, and philosophical problem that this framework can solve for the church, and really kind of go through that. Do you understand the things that are currently, why they are currently the way that they are? Do you have the ability to execute the solution? What's the plan to implement it, or what's the first 3 steps to, so they don't feel overwhelmed that this is going to be a huge undertaking, which it could be, depending on how big of a mess it is. What's the call to action if they're ready to move forward, and what's the next conversation if they aren't ready to move forward? And then what's at stake, both good and bad, for doing this? And so you really do make that leader that you're going to talk to the hero. You don't want to go in and just say, we've been doing it all wrong. You want to go in with humility and say, I think we have a solution to overcome some of the resistance that may frustrate us every single week that we have these backdoor conversations about. So I think we have a solution to this, and here's how we do it.
I was talking to a friend of mine actually yesterday, and he was telling me how his pastor is, he read the book, he read Building a Story Brand, and immediately got excited about it because he felt like that was the solution that could work. But then as they were going through the brand script process, he kept having reservations because, like, we're not talking about sin, we're not talking about this or that, and because he's always done it a certain way. And my friend had to keep telling him, hey, we'll get to that, and just reaffirming that, like, this is why we're not going there yet. We want to help people before we get there. We want to get them in the door before we start talking about those things. And the senior pastor always came back around to, okay, that's right. But it's such a paradigm shift for leaders who have been doing things a certain way for a long time that we've got to be really patient and really gracious as we navigate that conversation with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key. I think it's not moving too quickly. You want to spend time. I mean, it depends. For me, I had the trust of our senior pastor and our staff to just take this and do what I needed to do to make this work. They trusted me to do that. For most people, they're going to probably need to bring in several people from the staff or the entire staff, depending on how big or small your staff is, and just kind of move through this. The great thing about this is it really begins to force your staff to answer tough questions of, why are we doing it this way? Why are we doing this event? Why are we, why have we designed the building the way that we've designed it? Why is this group meeting here? All these different difficult questions that a lot of times we don't want to ask because we're afraid to offend somebody. Sometimes those people who we think it might offend are the ones that end up asking the questions, and change begins to happen. And so, through our conversation for the last 25 minutes, we've talked about numbers, we talked about growth, we talked about, the story brand framework and kind of using consumer sales language. And if you looked at Mars Hill, that's very much the opposite of who Mars Hill is. In fact, we tried very hard not to be salesy. That's why we didn't talk about giving a whole lot, which is, a different story in itself. And we didn't story brand our giving language until November, and then saw 160% growth just in 2 months on that, just because we realized our attendance was going way too high and our giving was not moving at all, and we couldn't sustain the growth. But Mars Hill had to, in our staff's head, we understood who we were. We understood what was important to us. We could have conversations amongst ourselves of what was important to us and why we were different and what we valued. But we struggled to communicate that to somebody who walked in our door for the first time, who's never heard of us before, and say, tell me why I should be a part of this community. We struggled with that. And so for us to build trust with them, we really needed to be able to communicate clearly who we were and not do it in a way that, confused them more and scared them off, or, communicate something that we didn't want to communicate because it's not who we were.
And ultimately, the first ever episode of Solving Problems was about this, and we say it all the time. The reason we change our language to talk about people's problems is so we can get them in the door and introduce them to Jesus. It's not to water down the gospel. It's not to do anything like that. We just understand that in today's culture, what used to work may not and probably doesn't work anymore. So we're just trying to adapt to how people communicate, what they pay attention to, and how we can get them in the door so that we can, introduce them to Jesus and have him change their lives. Because at the end of the day, he's the only one that can solve the problems they're having.
Absolutely. And our biggest issue is we were designing our stuff, talking about things in a way that we understood them or our core group members understood them. We were not thinking about that guest on Saturday night trying to figure out, is this going to be a place where I take my family Sunday morning, and what do I need to expect?
Awesome, Josh. Thanks so much for hanging out with us for a few minutes.
Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
I'm super thankful for the time Josh spent with us. The day we recorded that, he actually come down with like a summer flu, so he wasn't feeling great, but he still took 30 minutes out of his day to just let us know about the success that they had. But that's it for this episode. As you may or may not know, we released all of season 3 at the same time. So if someone sent you this episode and shared it with you, we have 8 episodes right now that are out that are all about the successes that other churches are having by implementing the StoryBrand framework in their church. If you have more questions about that, we would love to talk to you more. I am at Jonathan_Caron on Instagram and Twitter, or look up Jonathan Caron on Facebook, and I should be the first one to pop up. Kyler is at Kyler_Nixon on Twitter and Instagram, or Kyler Nixon on Facebook. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We'd love to help you out in whatever ways we can. We would ask you to go ahead, subscribe, rate, review, so that you can hear all the shows and help other people find out more about the show as well. If you want to know more about partnering together to rebuild your church website or to implement StoryBrand for your church, you can head to hirejonathan.com and fill the form out there, and we'll talk about how we can transform your communication so you can reach more people. But that's it for right now. Go ahead and check out the other episodes this season, and we will see you next time. Bye.